I have tested in depth the capabilities for photography of the Mini 3 Pro in all different light conditions and in all situations. Still images taken with the Mini 3 are excellent in all departments, but especially in low light conditions. Thanks to the very wide aperture of the lens and the relatively big sensor, this drone is able to gather plenty of light and retain a good amount of detail in the shadows. We certainly are in a totally different league compared to the Mini 2. But there is an area where the Mini 3 could do better. It is certainly not a beast of detail, especially in elements farther away in the image. It is a matter of personal taste. Some users might like it and think that the image looks more natural, but personally I would appreciate a bit of extra detail. The Mini 3 has a quad-Bayer 0.77-inch sensor with a real resolution of 12 megapixels. This sensor is able to split each pixel into 4 smaller ones, thus creating a sort of 48 megapixel resolution, which should add a touch of extra detail, at least in certain light conditions. We enter the 48 megapixel photo mode in the photo video menu. It works in both orientation, the traditional landscape or the vertical mode specific to the Mini 3. Automatic exposure bracketing and panorama are not available, but I will try to perform 48MP high dynamic range and panorama manually later on in this video. I have taken the same photo both in 12 megapixel and in 48 megapixels, with the same exposure and white balance values. Let's see if we can spot some differences. In the first image, when zooming, I can certainly see more detail and resolution in the houses of this seaside village. The more we move further up, the more we notice it. The same goes for this second image. Even at this deep 300% zoom, we can better discern the boats, cars and houses. In this third image, the difference is even more evident. Let's have a look at a couple of more images, but this time it is your turn to put your impressions in the comment below. The next image is a bit different, as it can be considered a sort of moderate to high dynamic range. The sun is to the left of the frame at about 9 o'clock, but the clouds over Mount Etna reflect the light, giving a relatively strong luminosity in the upper part of the image. If we expose correctly to avoid burning the highlights, the elements on the ground will be quite dark. So we can test the ability of the sensor to recover the shadows while post-processing. Already in the full image we notice that the elements in the ground have much more detail in the 12 megapixel photo. And this is even much more evident in the zoomed in images. With the first release of the firmware, images taken in high dynamic range situation with the Mini 3 at 48 megapixels were a disaster with huge amount of chromatic noise. Things have improved a lot since, but the 48 megapixel mode will always give inferior result under these light conditions due to the tiny size of the pixels. The Mini 3 Pro in the normal single photo mode produces images practically noiseless at any ISO level from 100 to 3200. This is an astonishing achievement, due in part to the extremely wide aperture of the lens, and in part to black magic. In low light situations, the 48 megapixel mode produces images with much darker shadows, with a tendency to develop chromatic noise. There is also often luminal noise in uniform areas like the sky or the sea. Once again, this is not surprising, as several high-end video cameras adopt the opposite strategy. They offer a reduced amount of pixels compared to what the sensor side would normally allow in order to have bigger pixels for better performance in low light. I've also tried bracketed photos in 48 megapixel mode. I had to do it manually by modifying the value for shutter speed each time for 5 photos. The results are not satisfying as there is a lapse of a few seconds between each shot, therefore the drone drifts a little bit, and some elements in the image may move. So the merged images contain a good amount of ghosting that ruins the final result. I've also tried a manual panorama using 7 vertical 48 megapixel images. This time the result is excellent, with huge resolution and great detail. This is certainly an interesting way to use 48 megapixel photos, especially for large prints. The 48 megapixel photo mode of the Mini 3 is kind of useful in certain situations, but it is a bit of a one-trick pony, to be used for extra detail in easy light conditions. I find it frankly misleading to announce in the specs that the camera has a photo resolution of 48 megapixels. Some users might think that it is a better camera compared to the 20 megapixel one of the Air 2S or the Mavic 3. And this is not even remotely true.